Thanks, Alice. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to see you. It's lovely to be back. For those of you who don't know me, there's some new faces. I'm Lauren. I'm one of the team here in the evening service. And tonight I am continuing on our series on wisdom from the Proverbs. And I want to kind of focus in on one specific thing. And I want to look at what we learn from the Proverbs about friendship. And this is something that, as I was preparing this week and really thinking about this and really trying to tease out what it was that the Lord really wanted me to think about, because I don't know about you, but if you've read the Proverbs, there's lots of advice, there's lots of guidance, and there's loads of different topics. And so I wanted to kind of get something that I felt that was practical and that could really lead us to think a little bit more deeply about how we interact with each other. And when I was praying about this and looking through the Proverbs and doing that, I really felt like God really pinpointed me to 3 specific verses and thinking about our friendship. Because I think that we're in a time now where, Sam spoke about it last week, where things are sort of returning to normal, dare we say it. And I guess we've spent a few years isolated, and we've spent a few years where we have mainly sat in our small bubbles for safety and for all of those reasons. But we're now starting to kind of spread that out again. And I guess for some of us, we're rebuilding friendships, we're rediscovering friendships, we're spending more time with friends, and we're building new friendships. And I really think that as Christians, how we treat our friends really reflects our character. I think it really reflects our heart. And I think it's really important as Christians, when we look at friendship, to think about whether or not we're actually reflecting Jesus in that. I think it's really important to think about how we treat each other. And so I really think that I'm hoping this is quite practical. I'm hoping that this is something that you feel you can go away and have a think about your own friendships, or friendships that what kind of friend you are, or what kind of friends you have. And also, I think, as Arian said, which was a fantastic word. I don't know where he's gone to, but it was an absolutely fantastic word. But just that thought that sometimes we need to check in. Sometimes we need to have a little look and evaluate what is happening around us and think about whether we are reflecting Jesus in that. So in his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis wrote, the typical expression of opening friendship would be something like, "What, you two, I thought I was the only one." And C.S. Lewis wrote a whole piece of writing on friendship. And in his writings, he describes friendship as the least natural of loves. Because actually, biologically, it doesn't provide us with the same things as romantic or familial love. And he considers that friends walk beside each other in comparison to lovers who are looking at each other directly. And he talks about friendship being strengthened and developed by welcoming others into the fold. And he writes that friendship is freely given and taken. It doesn't come with the same responsibilities and duties that our familiar or romantic relationships do. We're not actually really duty bound to our friends, and our friends aren't duty bound to us. And he contemplates that actually when we band together in friendship with people, we separate ourselves from society in some way. And he notes that if we're banded together in wisdom and for good, it's really positive. But he's also quite realistic, and he highlights that if we band together with people who are corrupt or unwise, then friendships can be quite dangerous. C.S. Lewis talks about the fact that even within friendships, we're going to let each other down. That actually when we're not being pointed to the Creator, our friendships are not really enough to carry us through the world living well. So there's a bit of fluff on my microphone and it keeps tickling my nose. So I make my very important point and then, there we go. That's a bit better. But I really think it's interesting to consider this view of that C.S. Lewis brings, because actually I thought it was really well-rounded. And while the circumstances have definitely changed since the time that he wrote about friendship, and our society's considerations regarding friendship, particularly those of opposite genders, have largely shifted, I think there's a lot of truth in his observations. Because when you think about your friendships, what biological purpose do they actually serve us? But yet, from a social purpose, we know that they are integral to our well-being. What is it that binds you to your friends? It's often started with a shared interest, and then it evolves into shared memories and experiences, the movement of life side by side. And who is it that brings the best out of you? I often think I'd highlight different people in my life bringing out different things in me. So having good quality friends often brings out the best in us. And often we have an equal impact and we get to bring out the best in others. So that's kind of where I want us to be starting when we think about friendship. It's got all these facets to it. It's got all these things to it. Where do they start? How do they start? How do they build? What is it that binds people together? And Proverbs talks about friendship multiple times. And I think that whenever there is something mentioned in the Bible multiple times, there must be some godly importance to it. And there's loads and loads of advice in Proverbs about friendship, and I honestly am only really scratching the surface. So I'd really advise you to go and read it and explore it a bit further yourself. But tonight I want us to consider 3 things, because I've got 3 verses, and it's a good sermon if it's a 3-point sermon, according to 7 Pancaldi Loxley. But there's 3 things that the Proverbs teaches us about friendship, and things that I think that we can do to reevaluate and to check in with ourselves. And the first is that friendship is quality over quantity. The second is friendship is honesty over flattery. And the third is friendship is wisdom over folly. So let's consider that first point. Friendship is quality over quantity. And Proverbs 18:24 says, "A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." I don't know about any of you, but if you spend any time with children, usually, and you ask them about their friends, so I've got a 6-year-old nephew, and when I ask him about his friends, he tells me, and he counts them all off, and I've got the most friends, and I've got all these friends, and this person, and this person, and this person. And it's so wonderful, and I'm so happy that he's so social and has such a lovely time. But usually when you speak to kids and you talk to them, they count out all their friends, and they give you a big list. And when you listen to children talk to each other, they tend to ask each other, well, who's your best friend? And they're really hoping that that person's going to say them. And many of us, as we grow up, I think we fall into similar traps of considering that the more friends we have, or the more highly valued we are regarded by more people, is a representation of our worth and our value. But the first bit of that proverb highlights to us that having more friends may not actually be all it's cracked up to be. Because if you think about it, if you have loads and loads and loads of people that you're sharing your time with, where do you actually get the opportunity to develop deep friendships that stand the test of time? When do you get to have the opportunity to get to know someone's stories and experiences? When do you have a chance to provide comfort and reassurance or joy and celebration? When do you get to share Jesus with them? When do you actually get to do life with someone if you're constantly flitting from one person to the next in a bid to make sure you have lots of people who count you in their circle? Friendships are usually born from similar interests or circumstances or experiences. And when we start our friendships, they're usually on a shallow level, aren't they? We like the same things, we like to spend time together. Maybe someone's chat's really great, maybe they're really funny. But actually we tend to start all our friendships on this acquaintance level. Each party is holding back a piece of themselves to ensure that their reputation remains intact, that we aren't too vulnerable. And then as time progresses, we usually identify the people that we remove those barriers for, the people we let in. We invest in others and we share life, while they invest in us and they share their life. Because friendships take time, and they take energy, and they often require sacrifice. So if we're filling our time up with lots of people, with no space to stop and breathe and ask the questions that let people open up, and no time to listen to their responses, then we kind of leave ourselves stranded in this place of being an acquaintance. And as C.S. Lewis identified, we aren't duty bound to our friends in the same way that we are to our families or our partners. But yet in true friendship, we find comfort and help. We act in a way that allows our friends to seek solace and to support their losses, to bring us into their celebrations and their wins. And often the same can't really be said for the way we consider or treat our acquaintances. Throughout the Bible, we see examples of great friendships. We see Moses and Aaron and David and Jonathan and Peter and John and so many more. But the greatest friendship we see, and that we actually get to experience, is between us and Jesus. The end of the proverb says, "But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." And this isn't just talking about having one good friend, one best friend. It's actually referring to God or Jesus. I had never really thought about it. Well, I had a conversation with Nat quite a few years ago, actually, about in the Bible where Jesus calls us his friends. And it kind of came back to me when I was doing this and I was reflecting on it, and I thought, do we actually know that we have a God who wants to be our friend? He wants to do life with us, to share in the intimate moments, in the good, in the bad. He wants to go deeper. He wants to share in the interest and then break down the barriers, and he wants to celebrate the joys and the wins and console us in the losses. And we just sang, when we sang Reckless Love, we sang about how there's nothing he won't overcome. There's no shadow he won't light up. There's no mountain he won't climb up to come after us. He chases you into that friendship. You know, we know this because Jesus said in John 15, "No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you." Maybe it doesn't astound you in the same way, but I think that's pretty mind-blowing. That the Lord of all the universe wants to be my mate. You know, God doesn't only want to know us and his promises for us, but he does it voluntarily. Siblings are bound together by blood and family ties. And I've got 2 big brothers, and I really love them, and they're great crack, but I tell you what, they do drive me absolutely nuts. And there are many times when my brothers maybe choose to do something that I probably would think, oh, there's probably a better way to do that, isn't there? Or probably wouldn't have done that myself. I mean, they equally feel the exact same about me, so it's not a criticism of them. But they're my family, and I might not agree with them, but I support them because they're my family. And God wants to be even closer than that. He's not bounded to our friendship because he's our Father, but actually he wants to be in a relationship with us because we are us. He wants to be our friend. He is the one who sticks closer to us in the moments when we feel abandoned, when we are let down, when we stand alone, feeling like our voice is the only one. So when you consider your friendships, I think we need to consider the quality. Is the quality of them just like the quality of that relationship that God wants to have with us? For Proverbs tells us that the quality is more important than the quantity. And I do think it challenges us to consider who we are in our friendships with others as well. Are we giving people the quality friendship they deserve, or are we just cramming in more and more people into our social life so we don't get lonely? Are we doing life with our friends, or are we just dropping in for a coffee and not really listening to what happens outside of the times that we see them? Friendship is quality over quantity. Secondly, I want to consider that friendship is honesty over flattery. And you guys, if you've been around church any length of time, or you were listening to Sam's preach last week, which was absolutely fantastic, and I'd highly recommend listening back to it if you haven't heard it, or just listening back to it again, because there was loads of wisdom in it. But Proverbs 27:17 says, "Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another." I'm not going to repeat what Sam spoke about last week, but he talked about it in the context of relationships that help us to grow. I just want us to consider about how our friendships can sharpen each other. I have a few friends who I know will always speak truthfully to me. They will always keep me accountable, and they will always encourage me in a way that keeps me humble. And sometimes when our friends speak truthfully to us or identify areas of weakness for us, it really hurts. It mainly hurts our pride, but actually it can really hurt. But if we are building the deep, good quality friendships that I talked about before, we know that this hurt doesn't mean the end of that relationship. When these friends speak to me in that way, I sit up and I listen. I take on board the things they're telling me. And I consider how my behavior or my thought or my words need to be changed. And it doesn't happen overnight, but I can tell you that the person I am today is because of these friends who have loved me enough to not let me keep moving in a way that is going to hurt me in the long run. I've got a lot of friends who I would consider family. You can tell by my accent, I'm not born and raised in Essex, but I've been here quite a while now. But I don't live in the same place as my family, and so friendships for me are important. And so it's important for me to be surrounded by these people who aren't going to just let me continue in a way that isn't going to help. I really like the idea of considering this verse like, consider your kitchen knives. Some of you will not be as dull as me and be excited about kitchen knives, but I got some new ones when I got married. It was very exciting. But what I did learn about when I became a grown-up and had to have kitchen knives and think about it is that over time they actually do get blunt, and that you have to use this horrible metal sharpener thing to make them more effective and to fulfill their purpose. And when you're sharpening these knives, there's an uncomfortable scraping of the metals together. And usually there's some residue from where that dull metal has been scraped away, and it has to be wiped away and put in the bin. And I think this is quite a nice analogy of how our friendships can build us. They can build us so that we can be used for our kingdom purpose, so that we can be restored to be a better version of ourselves. You see, when our friends speak truthfully to us and it's different from our opinions or questions or challenges our behaviors, there is that period of discomfort. It's just like those metals scraping together. It's not that pleasant an experience. And often there's some residue from the removal of whatever had to be scraped away. And this is where I think we have to consider how we respond. Do we respond knowing that it was out of love, or do we respond by ending a friendship? Because ultimately, if we choose to ignore the sharpening, we actually remain dull and we remain blunt, and we're not able to fulfill our kingdom purpose. But if we develop our friendships and allow ourselves to be sharpened, listening to the wisdom of our friends, we're actually left better off. We're left sharper and more effective and wider and wiser, and we have a better perspective than we had before. We're restored as a better version of what we were before we were sharpened. And I think it's actually really amazing that God places people and friendships in our lives just so we get to be more like Jesus. So we get to fulfill our purpose. So we get to be filled with wisdom. And actually, when we consider it that way, I think friendship's just one of the most beautiful gifts we get given. And it's really important to consider the other side of this as well, because obviously we're saying, okay, so I'm saying that my friends can sharpen me, but friendship is a two-way street, you know. So there are times maybe when I have to sharpen my friends. And I think we have a responsibility to our friends to ensure that they are loved and supported to fulfill their kingdom purpose. And I think that being able to sharpen each other is part of that responsibility. But it can be uncomfortable, can't it? It's uncomfortable to receive it, but it can be uncomfortable to give it sometimes too. And so we have to do it carefully. So think about I'll think about when I'm sharpening. I say I'm sharpening. My husband sharpens the knives because the noise sets me off a little bit. What's that? It's safer. It's safer, apparently. He's actually probably not incorrect. Anyway, this defeats my point that I'm going to make. But when you sharpen the knives, you have to be very careful, don't you? Because if you're like brandishing a knife around and scraping against other metal, you can cause injury, can't you? You can cause injury that might be lasting, and it might lead to scars. And you have to do it multiple times. You have to run the metal against the other bit of metal multiple times. You can't just do it once and then it's fine and it's sharp again. And I think that's a lesson to us, because when we are truthful to sharpen our friends, we need to do it in a way that doesn't cause them lasting injury that leaves scars. And we might just have to broach the subject multiple times to help them to continue to be sharpened. Think about how Jesus shared the gospel. He loved his disciples dearly, but how often did he have to remind them of the promises of God and actually ask them, like, why have you got so little faith? He challenged them. He rebuked them. He rebuked all these people he came into contact with because their thoughts or their actions or their belief weren't in line with those of the Lord. And yet, Jesus is love. Jesus is the friend who stands closer than a brother. If Jesus is able to do that in a way that causes no lasting harm to others and encourages them for the better, then we should be able to do that too. Ultimately, we need to remember that when we are sharpening each other, we're doing it out of love, not to cause lasting injury. Because friendship is honesty over flattery. And finally, let's consider that friendship is wisdom over folly. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." I think it's really important that we as followers of Jesus are actually aware of the importance of the people we surround ourselves with. Jim Rohn says, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And I don't know about you, but I want that average to be a version of myself that is like Jesus. I want that average to be a version of myself that is meeting my kingdom purpose. I want that average to be the best version of me that I can be. And I want the people who spend time with me, and I'm part of their average, to be the best version of themselves that they can be. I'm sure each and every one of us has experience of this, but there's always situations you go into, isn't there, where you encounter someone who's having a bad day, and they're feeling a bit negative, a bit angry, and they change the whole atmosphere of a space. And then you might find yourself speaking a little bit more negatively, or becoming a little bit more angry, or talking about a situation or a person or a circumstance, and you can't see the positives anymore. Or those people, I laugh because you often find them in like uni situations, for any of you are at uni or have studied, and you find those people who are very stressed about an assignment. They're very, 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 very stressed about it, and then you kind of walk in and you're fine, and then they're very stressed, and then you leave, and they leave, and you're in this whirlwind of stress, and it happens in every situation, but I just remember it very clearly at uni, happening quite a lot, and you actually were fine, and then they leave, and they've set their stress, and you are feeling anxious. And you're feeling so stressed when actually you were fine before. And I went on a training course in my old job, and they called these people mood hoovers, which I thought was quite a funny way to refer to it. And like C.S. Lewis talked about, which I noted at the start, when we spend time combined with people who are negative or corrupt or unwise, then we can begin to behave and take on these perspectives. Like the proverb says, "For a companion of fools suffers harm." Our friendships and the people we do life with can really impact us in these ways. And on the flip side of that, I get to spend a lot of time with some friends who I really do get to see chasing after Jesus, chasing after their kingdom purpose, who can see Jesus in the situations that they're in, whether they're good or bad or in between. And when I spend time with them, I'm really motivated. I'm really encouraged. And not only that, these friends are wise people. Not because they're super academic or considered really smart, but actually because no matter what happens, they look for answers in the scriptures or in prayer or in worship. And ultimately, they look to Jesus for the wisdom and understanding to navigate their way through the world. And so when I go to them or I spend time with them or we do life together, guess where they direct me? They direct me to Jesus, to the scriptures, to prayer, to worship. These friendships are filled with encouragement and care. These friendships, they cheer me on, they celebrate my achievements and my successes, they listen to my concerns, they cry with me in my failures. And don't get me wrong, I also have some absolutely incredible, amazing friends who don't know Jesus. And they are wise, and I really value their opinions and their advice greatly. And they know that I love Jesus, so they always consider this in their advice and their support. But ultimately, in my desire to be more like Jesus, it's my friends who know him who direct me to him. And actually, when we have these people around us, it can help us to bring Jesus to friends of ours who don't know him. So, consider who it is that you build these good quality friendships with. Consider whether they will lead you to wisdom or to folly. Do your friendships, be they with people who know Jesus or don't know Jesus, lead you to him, or do they pull you away from him? Do your friendships put you in circumstances where you're uncomfortable, or do your friends behave in a way that doesn't build others up or honor or respect others? Do your friendships put you in places that can get you in trouble or danger? Because if they do, sounds a bit harsh, but I'd consider who you're being friends with. I'm going to invite the band back up, and as they're coming up, I just want to finish. It's a bit of a personal story, but I really hope it gives you a way to reflect on the power that our friendships can have, the way that they can bring Jesus to others, and the way that they can help others to bring kingdom purpose to their lives. I have one particular friend who I would credit with changing me significantly, changing my faith significantly. And she came into my life when I was having a lot of things spoken over me about who I was and how people thought about me that were really untrue. And she was a really new friend at that point. So we were in that kind of acquaintance stage. And she really pushed through to get those barriers down. And at no time did she shy away from the mess that I was in. This friend was one of the only people at the time who was aware of the things being said about me and how they were impacting me. And she spoke kindness and truth over me consistently. And she continuously reminded me about how I was viewed by God, how loved I was, how valued I was, how fearfully and wonderfully made I was. She consistently rebuked the untruths that I had believed until I was able to see the truth in her words and the inaccuracies in the other words being spoken. She led me closer to Jesus by telling me she loved me, but also by challenging me about how I had made a decision of how I had a choice in what I believed. She sharpened me. She didn't let me wallow. She told me to make a decision about believing the lies being spoken over me or the truth of the gospel. She sharpened me with difficult conversations and perspectives, but never in a way that belittled my pain. She helped me by seeing my pain and speaking truth into the situation. And this wasn't a quick thing, and she did it for years, and she still does it now. And never, ever once did she get frustrated about the fact that she had to do this over and over again. That is a good friend. That is a good quality friendship. A friend who encourages and brings wisdom into situations. A friend who challenges but doesn't belittle. A friend who is open and honest but shows you your true worth in the eyes of God. A friend who takes you back to Jesus over and over again. I aspire to be a friend like my friend. I aspire to be a friend like Jesus. I aspire to be a friend just like they are described in Proverbs. And I think if we know the Lord and we want to be reflective of Jesus in our relationships, then we should be aspiring to be friends just like the friends in Proverbs. Because friendship is a gift from God, and we should treat it as such. We should listen to the wisdom of the Bible when it tells us how to be a good friend and put it in action in our own lives. So I'm just going to finish up. So just as I finish, I just want to challenge you. I want you to think about. I hope this week that you go out and you think about, like Arian said, when we check in with ourselves, when we check our friendships, when we check how are we as a friend, what's happening with our friends. Are we putting quality over quantity? Are we putting honesty over flattery? And are we putting wisdom over folly? Thank you.